For 7 years, Emily Carter perfected the art of being invisible. In Tucson, Arizona, invisibility came easily if you wanted it. The desert swallowed stories. The heat discouraged questions. People minded their own lives. Emily blended into the rhythm of night shifts and quiet mornings, working as a civilian documentation specialist for a third-party contractor that serviced military aircraft. Her job title sounded dull on purpose. Her tasks were repetitive: logbooks, maintenance records, compliance checks. Paperwork that kept jets flying without ever touching the sky herself. She never complained, never lingered, never made friends. Her coworkers knew her as polite but distant. She declined happy hours. She avoided group photos. Her desk was sterile: no family pictures, no souvenirs, no past. Even her car, a faded gray sedan, carried no decals, no bumper stickers, no flags, no veteran pride slogans that so many others around the base wore like badges of honor. Emily understood something most people didn't. The quieter you lived, the less the world asked of you. Every morning just before sunrise, she walked home as jets thundered overhead from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. F-16s, A-10s, occasionally something sharper, faster, something that made the air vibrate differently. When that happened, Emily's shoulders stiffened, and her steps slowed for half a second before she forced herself to keep walking. She never looked up. Looking up was dangerous. 7 years earlier, she had looked up once, watching flames spiral across a night sky, and that single moment had cost her everything she was. Now she lived by rules she never wrote down but followed with discipline that bordered on ritual. Don't draw attention. Don't correct anyone with rank. Don't use terminology civilians shouldn't know. And above all, never step onto an active runway again. The rules worked until they didn't. On a blistering Tuesday afternoon, Emily received an email marked mandatory attendance. A routine compliance audit had been expanded. Civilian contractors were required to physically verify maintenance documentation on base. Temporary clearance. Supervised movement only. No exceptions. Emily stared at the screen longer than necessary. For 7 years, she had structured her life to avoid this exact scenario. Her company usually handled audits remotely, digital submissions, third-party verification, but something had changed. Increased security protocols, heightened readiness, budget reshuffling. The reason didn't matter, the result did. She was going back onto the base. The guard at the gate barely glanced at her as he handed over a temporary badge. Visitor access only, yellow zones, follow your escort. Emily nodded, her expression neutral but her pulse hammered in her ears. The scent hit her first: fuel, metal, scorched rubber. It was a smell her body remembered before her mind could stop it. Inside the base, the world felt louder, sharper. The ground vibrated with distant engines. Her escort, a young airman barely old enough to shave, chatted nervously about the heat, about weekend plans, about how cool it was to see the big birds up close. Emily answered when required, short sentences, no details. As they crossed a wide open stretch near the runway, the air changed. The sound wasn't just noise, it was pressure, a deep, predatory roar that rolled through her chest. An F-22 Raptor streaked down the runway, its angular body slicing the heat haze like a blade. Emily stopped walking. She hadn't meant to. Her feet simply refused to move. Her hand curled into a fist, nails digging into her palm. Her breathing went shallow, controlled, instinctive, like someone bracing for G-forces. The escort didn't notice at first. "Ma'am." Emily forced herself forward, but the damage was done. Across the tarmac, inside the cockpit of the accelerating jet, Captain Ryan Hale felt something he hadn't felt in years. Recognition. He didn't know why. The woman below was just a civilian, plain clothes, badge swinging slightly in the wash of engine thrust, but her stance was wrong. Civilians leaned back when Raptors took off. They flinched. They stared. She didn't. She stood perfectly still, weight balanced, chin tucked, eyes tracking the jet's trajectory without moving her head. Hale's grip tightened on the controls. His instincts screamed. I know that posture. As the Raptor lifted off, Hale glanced down one last time. The woman finally turned away, but not before he saw her wrist, a pale line just visible beneath her sleeve. Thin, precise. A survival scar. Hale's mind raced through memories he hadn't touched since flight school, whispered stories told late at night, names that didn't appear in official records. One name in particular. Night Fury. The pilot who flew like the jet was an extension of her nervous system. The pilot who broke limits without breaking aircraft. The pilot who vanished after a classified incident that command pretended never happened. Hale shook his head mid-climb. Impossible. 7 years was a lifetime in aviation. Legends didn't retire into civilian paperwork jobs. Legends didn't walk around with visitor badges. Still, his heart wouldn't slow. On the ground, Emily reached the documentation office and sat through the audit in a daze. She answered questions mechanically, her thoughts still stuck on the moment the Raptor had passed overhead. On the way out, she kept her eyes on the concrete, counting steps like she used to count seconds between maneuvers. She almost made it. As she neared the exit gate, she heard boots behind her, fast, purposeful. Ma'am, excuse me. She didn't turn. Ma'am, please. Emily stopped slowly. She took a breath, rearranged her face into something harmless and turned around. Captain Ryan Hale stood a few feet away, flight suit half unzipped, helmet tucked under his arm. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Yes, she said calmly, too calmly. Hale hesitated, then spoke the words he hadn't planned to say out loud. Ma'am, has anyone ever called you? He stopped himself, swallowed. Emily's gaze sharpened for a split second before she masked it. That single fracture in her composure was all he needed. Hale lowered his voice. Is that you, Night Fury? Emily's world tilted, and somewhere behind them, an alarm began to sound. Emily felt her chest tighten. 7 years of carefully constructed invisibility, the life she had built from erasure, collapsed in an instant under the weight of that single, whispered name. Night Fury. She had buried it, not just the call sign but everything it represented. Triumph, loss, fear, and the deadly precision that had earned her a place in history that, officially, didn't exist. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as she forced a polite, neutral smile. I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else, Captain, she said evenly, her voice a practiced calm, but her pulse roared in her ears. Hale blinked, confused. He wasn't wrong or mistaken. The stance, the posture, the subtle precision in her breathing, it screamed experience beyond civilian life. His instincts, honed over a dozen years flying Raptors, told him this woman had danced with the edge of physics and lived to tell the tale. His eyes flicked toward her wrist. That faint scar, a mere line beneath the sleeve of her blouse, was identical to the one he remembered from a classified incident years ago. The incident that had been erased from official records. Look, I don't mean to pressure, he started cautiously. Emily interrupted, still smiling, but the edges were sharp. Captain, I really think you have the wrong person. Hale's gut told him she was lying, and deep down, she knew it too. The air between them thickened with tension, like a storm about to break over the Sonoran Desert. You're telling me you've never flown a Raptor in combat? Hale asked quietly, lowering his voice, as if speaking louder would shatter the illusion. Emily's eyes flicked to the jets roaring overhead, performing maneuvers so complex that even veteran pilots flinched. Her voice caught for a fraction of a second before she swallowed. I work in documentation now. Hale studied her, searching for hesitation. A crack in the mask, but her face was serene, controlled, too controlled. You're lying, he said bluntly. "I don't know how or why, but you're lying, and I've seen enough to know when someone isn't telling the truth." Emily's hands tightened into fists at her sides. She didn't like being cornered, but Hale wasn't a threat, at least, not in the physical sense. The real threat, as always, came from visibility, from exposure. 7 years of hiding had been about avoiding people like him, those who could recognize the extraordinary, those who would demand explanations, accountability, or worse, use her again. Hale stepped closer, his voice softened, almost pleading. "You don't have to say anything, not yet, but someone like you, someone with your skills, doesn't just vanish. Not from the air, not from the military, and not from me." Emily's gaze dropped to the concrete. Memories flashed without permission. The midnight takeoffs, the maneuver she'd perfected that defied all safety protocols, the fireball that had taken 2 of her friends, the secrecy that had cost her everything. "You don't understand," she murmured. "I didn't leave, I ran, and I can't go back, not to that world, not to that life." Hale, sensing the wall she had built, didn't push further. Instead, he nodded, though his eyes never left her. 7 years, he said softly. 7 years of silence. Why now?" Emily shook her head. "I didn't choose now, I didn't choose any of this." Her words were calm, almost monotone, but the underlying tension was a low hum of steel under sandpaper. "I have a life now, a quiet life, and it's fragile." Hale swallowed, realizing the gravity of her tone. This wasn't just modesty or humility, it was a warning. The life she'd built was a fortress constructed from fear and discipline, and any breach could destroy it. Then the unexpected happened. The base's alarms erupted, shrill and urgent, shattering the moment like glass. Red lights flashed across nearby hangars. Pilots sprinted. Mechanics scrambled. Radios crackled with incomprehensible chatter. "What's happening?" Emily asked instinctively, the calm mask cracking slightly as her senses snapped back to heightened awareness. Hale's eyes went wide. "Not sure." His voice trailed as he watched the radar screens flicker. Raptor 2-1 unresponsive, engines failing, altitude dropping fast. Emily's stomach twisted. Every muscle in her body remembered what to do before her mind could even process the orders. 7 years of hiding, her abilities meant nothing now. Instinct had taken control. She took a step toward the control room, her voice firm. "Override manual flight controls. Delta 7 channel. Give me access to hybrid guidance. Now." Hale froze. Hybrid guidance. The term was classified, dead language, forbidden. Only someone trained at the highest levels and gone missing would know how to execute it. All around them, engineers and officers stared, mouths open. Radios scrambled with static. Emily's pulse thrummed with adrenaline, but her hands were steady. Her eyes flicked between the screens, calculating vectors, engine outputs, trajectory. "Captain, you realize what she's saying?" An engineer whispered, horrified. Hale didn't answer. He was frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. Recognition and fear warred in his chest. Emily's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "Now, or the jet crashes." Somewhere inside the failing Raptor, the pilot struggled with controls that no longer responded. Outside, the engine screamed. Every second stretched into eternity. And in that precise, suspended moment, Hale realized the truth he had tried to deny. The legend of Night Fury hadn't faded. She was alive, she was here. And she hadn't come back for recognition. She had come back for control. Emily's fingers danced over the terminal controls with precision only a ghost of the air could possess. The jet, previously spiraling toward disaster, began to respond, tentatively at first, then decisively. It steadied barely. Hale exhaled, trembling. Engineers muttered prayers. Radios went silent for a heartbeat. Emily finally allowed herself a small, imperceptible nod, acknowledging that her intervention had saved the aircraft, and possibly its pilot. Then she stepped back, mask returning, calm like a desert storm that had just passed. Hale looked at her, awestruck and unsteady. You didn't have to do that, he said, voice barely audible. Emily's eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. I didn't. The alarms continued to blare, but she had already begun walking away, toward the exit, toward the life she had fought to preserve. Hale called after her, You can't just disappear again. She didn't respond. Behind them, the screen monitoring Raptor 21 flickered, then stabilized. The pilot inside was alive, but barely. And somewhere, deep inside the base, someone realized that 7 years of silence could no longer hold the truth. Because Night Fury had returned, Emily walked toward the perimeter fence, the sound of alarms fading slightly behind her. Her badge beeped as she exited the restricted area, but every step felt heavier, as if the weight of 7 years of secrecy pressed against her shoulders. She kept her head down, heart hammering, willing the world to see her as ordinary. She almost made it, almost. A shadow fell across her path. Ma'am! She froze. Turning slowly, she saw Captain Ryan Hale striding toward her, boots clanging against the concrete in rhythm with the low rumble of residual jet engines. The wind carried the smell of jet fuel and ozone, the scent instantly igniting memories she had fought hard to suppress. He stopped a few feet away, gaze locked on her face. Hale had seen a lot in his years as an F-22 pilot, tragedy, chaos, moments of pure adrenaline, but nothing prepared him for this. He studied the subtle tension in her stance, the precise alignment of her shoulders, the micro-adjustments she made as if every step required exact calculation. He had trained new pilots for years. He had memorized techniques, call signs, and combat maneuvers. He had never doubted the stories he'd heard about Night Fury until now. You're lying, he said softly, voice barely above the desert wind. I don't know how, but I know you are. The posture, the wrist, the way you breathe your Night Fury. Emily's heart skipped a beat. 7 years of carefully curated anonymity, gone in a few words. She exhaled slowly, forcing a neutral expression, hiding the storm inside. Captain, I told you, I'm not who you think I am, she said calmly, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Too fast for casual observers to notice, too precise for someone like Hale to miss. I know what I saw, he replied, stepping closer. You don't disappear for 7 years without leaving a trace. You don't vanish from the program, not you. And now you're here. Why? Emily's jaw tightened. Memories she had buried for years clawed at the surface. The blacked-out nights, the classified missions, the maneuvers that no one was supposed to survive, and the night she had lost 2 friends in an incident the Air Force had erased from the records. I didn't disappear by choice, she said finally, voice steady, but each word carried the weight of years of fear and regret. I had to for my own survival, for my sanity. Hale studied her, every instinct screaming that she was telling the truth, but not the whole truth. You left because of what happened, he said carefully. Because of the test flight. I've read the reports, what's left of them. 2 fatalities, a jet that shouldn't have flown. And then you were gone. Emily's fists clenched at her sides. She had rehearsed this moment in her head countless times. She knew that once Hale recognized her, everything would change. There would be no hiding, no quiet life, no ordinary desk job. I couldn't stay, she admitted softly. They wanted me to keep flying, to keep being something I wasn't supposed to be. I refused. I walked away. And I've kept my distance because they never stopped looking for me. Hale's eyes narrowed, trying to piece together the puzzle. But now they've called you back. They need you, don't they? Emily shook her head almost imperceptibly. Not for me, for the jet, for the system, for them. Her voice faltered. For a split second the mask slipped, revealing the guilt she had carried for 7 years. Hale exhaled slowly, realizing the magnitude of what she had just said. The jet she had saved earlier, it wasn't just any aircraft. It was Raptor 21, a prototype that represented years of top-secret development. and only someone with her experience, her knowledge, and her instincts could have stabilized it mid-crisis. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "You know what this means, don't you?" he asked quietly. "Once command knows you're here, there's no going back. They'll demand explanations. They'll want results, and if you refuse—" Emily's gaze hardened. "They don't get to decide who I am anymore. I've survived 7 years without them. I can survive today. I've survived before. I can do it again." Hale studied her, admiration and awe mixing with concern. She was still the same woman who had dominated the skis as Night Fury, but now she carried the weight of years of self-imposed exile. The discipline, the precision, the razor-sharp instincts, they were all intact, but layered under a veneer of ordinary civilian restraint. And yet there was something more, something Hale couldn't quite name, but that made him instinctively wary: fear, anticipation, a readiness for combat that hadn't dulled despite her absence from active duty. Before he could speak again, the sound of engines cut through the tense desert air. Another jet, a standard Raptor piloted by a young officer, roared past, its contrails slicing the sky. The radar screen inside the command center flickered wildly, and alarms blared once more. Emily's head snapped toward the sound. Instantly her body went rigid, senses hyper-alert. Hale followed her gaze. "Raptor 2-1, it's in trouble," she muttered under her breath, almost to herself. Her voice carried a tone that froze Hale in place. There was no hesitation, no panic, only precision. Years of instinct embedded deep in her core. Without thinking, she broke into a sprint toward the command trailer, her movements fluid and deliberate, every step calculated for maximum efficiency. Hale followed, caught between disbelief and awe, unsure whether to stop her or let her go. Inside the command trailer, chaos reigned. Technicians shouted over the blaring alarms, attempting to stabilize the jet, but nothing responded. Control panels flickered red, warning lights flashing like a violent heartbeat. Emily stepped up to the main console, her fingers flying over the controls with a practiced ease that made even veteran engineers pause. "Override manual flight controls," she commanded, voice crisp and unwavering. "Delta 7 channel, give me access to hybrid guidance now." An engineer froze mid-motion. "Ma'am, that's impossible. Only certified pilots." "I know what I'm doing," Emily cut in sharply. Her eyes were laser-focused, tracing engine outputs, trajectory vectors, and system errors in real time. "Now." Hale watched, stunned. Every movement, every calculation was instinctual, precise, lethal. This was not a civilian, not even a legend spoken of in hushed tones. This was Night Fury in the flesh. The Raptor, previously spiraling toward disaster, began to respond. Slowly at first, like a wild animal tamed by a single touch, then decisively as the jet leveled off and stabilized. The alarms dimmed and silence fell over the control room, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. Hale couldn't look away. This was a woman who had survived impossible odds, defied physics, and walked away from a world that demanded everything from her. And now she had returned, not for glory, not for recognition, but because instinct demanded it. Emily finally stepped back, mask slipping back into place, calm and composed once more. She had done her job. She had preserved a life, a jet, and a secret. Hale exhaled, voice trembling. I don't know what to say." Emily's gaze met his, unwavering. "You don't need to say anything." Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of jet fuel and ozone. Hale's heart raced. He knew without question that the legend had returned. And this time she wasn't hiding. But the consequences of her return had only just begun. Because somewhere deep within the base, officials were watching. And Night Fury's 7-year silence had just shattered. The alarms weren't just loud. They were a shriek that rattled walls, shattered concentration, and sent every heartbeat into panic mode. Raptor 2-1, the jet Emily had just stabilized, was still failing. Engineers shouted over each other, their voices drowned by sirens and static-filled radios. Emily didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the central console, her eyes scanning streams of numbers, vectors, and readouts. Years of instinct, of living at the edge of physics, came flooding back. Every fraction of a second mattered. Every command could mean life or death. Altitude dropping too fast, engines 1 and 2 unresponsive. A young officer shouted. Eject protocol is. Emily didn't wait. She slammed her palm on the override panel. Hybrid manual override. Engage Delta 7 now. The room went still for a heartbeat. Then the consoles flickered. Systems hesitated, quivering under the strain of conflicting commands. Ma'am, that's classified. Only certified pilots. I know exactly what I'm doing, she said sharply, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Do it. Follow my instructions, or the pilot dies. Hale stared, jaw tight, as her hands danced across the keys and touch screens. Each movement was precise, almost surgical. He knew every maneuver she commanded was beyond standard protocol, beyond anything he had learned in flight school. And yet somehow the Raptor obeyed. Outside, the aircraft trembled as it stabilized midair, hanging like a wounded bird. Inside, the pilot fought with the controls, confusion and panic etched across his face. He was young, green, and trained to follow procedures, not defy them. Emily's voice, calm and absolute, reached him through the radio. Listen to me. I'm taking temporary manual guidance. Follow my commands exactly. You're alive. You'll land this bird safely if you trust me. There was hesitation, then obedience. The jet responded, slowly at first. The engines roared back to life, the nose leveled, and the descent began. Outside the trailer windows, Hale watched the jet's silhouette tilt against the desert sun. You've done this before, he muttered under his breath. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was running faster than any words could travel, calculating lift, thrust, altitude, and trajectory. 7 years of hiding hadn't dulled her instincts. If anything, they were sharper now, refined by patience, by necessity, by absence. The young pilot inside the cockpit followed her voice with surgical precision. Emily's instructions cut through fear like a scalpel. Adjust left thruster 3 degrees. Correct pitch by 1.2. No, wait, add 0.6 faster. Hold it, hold it. Outside, the jet groaned under the strain, metal flexing against forces no engineer had ever expected it to endure. The pilot gritted his teeth, hands white-knuckled, sweat dripping down his brow. Somewhere, he sensed the ghost of a legend guiding him. In the command trailer, officers whispered in awe. Who is she? One muttered. How does she know these commands? Hale stepped closer to Emily, voice low. She's Night Fury, he said quietly, almost to himself. No one else could. Emily ignored him. She didn't have the luxury of words. Every second counted. A single miscalculation could send the jet spiraling into the desert, or worse, over the nearby civilian zones. Prepare emergency landing coordinates, she barked. Guide him to runway 39er. Maximum approach speed 60%. Keep engine 1 at 83% thrust. Adjust flaps manually. Now. The pilot obeyed, trembling, every nerve screaming in fear and exhilaration. The Raptor responded with unnatural grace, descending in a controlled, almost impossible arc. Engineers held their breath, eyes glued to readouts, watching temperatures spike, hydraulics groan, and yet the jet obeyed every impossible instruction. Hale couldn't move. His hands were clenched at his sides. His mind screamed in disbelief. He had flown thousands of hours, trained countless pilots, and studied every classified maneuver in the manual. And yet, nothing prepared him for this. A civilian, 7 years out of the program, controlling a prototype fighter in mid-crisis like it was an extension of her own body. Finally, the jet touched down. The landing was hard but survivable. Tires skidded, sparks flew, and the tailhook caught the arresting cable. The engine screamed and then fell silent. Silence settled over the runway, broken only by distant alarm bells and the ringing in everyone's ears. Inside the cockpit, the young pilot slumped, pale and shaking. He survived, alive, breathing, but he had just faced death, guided by a woman he didn't know and couldn't understand. Outside, Emily stepped back, calm once more, mask replacing the storm of adrenaline. Her pulse was still fast but controlled. She had done what was needed. She had saved a life, a jet, and possibly prevented a catastrophe. Hale ran up to her, awe and disbelief mixing with fear. Do you understand what you just did?" She gave him a small, unreadable smile. "I understand what needed to be done. That's all that matters." For a moment, the desert wind carried the scent of burnt fuel and ozone, the taste of adrenaline lingering in the air. Hale realized the full scope of her skill, her danger, and her secrecy. 7 years had hidden this woman from the world, but the world had almost paid the price for her absence. Suddenly, a voice cut through the trailer intercom, tense and sharp. "Secure the area. Immediate briefing for all command staff. Unauthorized access to Delta 7 protocol detected. All personnel accounted for. Lockdown in effect." Emily's pulse spiked again. She hadn't just revealed herself to Hale. She had exposed secrets the Air Force had buried for years. Protocols she had once obeyed perfectly now existed in a dangerous limbo. Hale looked at her, concern etched into every line of his face. "They know who you are," he said simply. Emily's jaw tightened. She knew this day would come, but knowing didn't make it any easier. 7 years of careful anonymity, erased with the swipe of a fingertip and a desperate intervention. "They'll want answers," she said softly, "and they won't like what I tell them." From the intercom, the voice barked again, now more urgent. "All classified personnel report immediately. Raptor 2-1 is under full investigation. Unauthorized override detected. Security breach. Investigation ongoing." Hale swallowed hard. "You just saved a life," he said, his voice tense. "Now they're going to question you and everything you've done for the past 7 years." Emily nodded, eyes narrowing. She felt the old fire return, the same precision, the same clarity that had earned her the call sign she never wanted to hear again. Night Fury didn't hide out of fear. She hid because she had a life worth protecting. And now, that life was at risk once more. Somewhere behind them, officials were mobilizing. Phones rang, footsteps echoed, and alarms continued to scream across the base. Emily realized one thing with perfect clarity. She was no longer invisible. 7 years of silence, 7 years of hiding, had ended in 10 seconds of action. And the consequences of that action were just beginning. The countdown to exposure had started. The secure briefing room was stark, white, and cold, every surface reflecting the fluorescent glare overhead. Emily sat in the center, hands folded neatly on the table, every muscle tense yet controlled. Around her, officers and engineers from the Air Force, intelligence units, and security personnel whispered, their voices a low hum that made the silence around her feel suffocating. Cameras tracked her every move. Microphones hung in plain sight. Every eye was focused, every judgment imminent. The general entered, gray-haired, bearing decades of authority, his eyes sharpened like a hawk scanning prey. The room went still as he approached. He studied Emily with a precision that made her chest tighten. "Captain Carter," he said quietly. The words hung heavy in the air. Emily's head lifted. The name wasn't just a name. It was history, identity, and danger all rolled into one. She hadn't heard it in 7 years, not from anyone who mattered. "You disappeared," the general continued, voice low, measured. "We buried your file." Emily's fingers twitched slightly beneath the table. She had expected this moment, rehearsed it in fragments and dreams, yet the weight of its reality was heavier than she imagined. "I asked you to," she replied, calm but edged with steel. "Because Night Fury was never supposed to survive, and neither was I." The general's expression shifted slightly, a mixture of respect and irritation. You didn't just disappear. You left behind classified operations, dead protocols, and questions that we couldn't answer. Why now? Emily's gaze swept across the room, taking in faces hardened by years of procedure and secrecy. Engineers, pilots, and commanders, they were all waiting for a confession, an explanation, a justification that didn't exist in the language of the living. I didn't leave because I wanted to, she began, her voice steady, low, almost a whisper. I left because I had no choice. The maneuver that earned me my call sign, it destabilized the Raptor's AI. I could control it, but no one else could. I warned them. I begged them. And when 2 friends died, I walked away. I walked away to survive because if I hadn't, they would have silenced me in a different way. A low murmur spread through the room. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances. The young engineers shifted, startled by the admission of events they hadn't read about. The general's eyes hardened, piercing into hers. You walked away, he repeated, as if testing the concept against reality. You abandoned the Air Force. Emily's jaw tightened. I abandoned nothing. I protected lives. I saved what could be saved, and I survived. The room went quiet again, heavy with disbelief. Hale stood off to the side, arms crossed, absorbing every word, watching the legend of Night Fury reveal herself, not in tales or whispers, but in the cold, uncompromising voice of a woman whose past demanded acknowledgement. The general exhaled, leaning forward slightly. And now they need you again. Foreign forces have been testing boundaries with stolen technology. Jets, AI, maneuvers, things only you understand. They're asking for Night Fury. Emily's pulse quickened. She had anticipated this possibility. Command would never forget the woman who could bend the Raptor to her will. And now, the same forces that had forced her into hiding were resurfacing. I didn't come back for that, she said evenly, but the underlying steel in her voice made it clear she had considered it. I came back because a life was at stake, because someone trusted a pilot they weren't ready to control. The general leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. And you succeeded. He gestured to the console, replaying the emergency landing of Raptor 2-1. But you just exposed every classified protocol, every override, every secret the program had tried to bury. We can't protect you anymore. The world knows Night Fury exists, and now you're back on our radar. Emily's eyes narrowed. She had survived secrecy, avoidance, and self-imposed exile. Now she was being cornered again, not physically, but by necessity. The rules had changed. 7 years of silence could not shield her from the consequences of heroism. Hale approached her quietly, voice low. Emily, you did what was needed, but they're not going to let this slide. You saved the jet, yes, but they'll want debriefs, they'll want protocols, they'll want the maneuver itself, and they'll question your every decision. I know, she said. Her gaze flicked toward the secure monitors, tracking the young pilot she had guided, the jet she had saved. And I'm ready for that, but I am not doing it on their terms. Never again. The general, sensing the unspoken threat, narrowed his eyes. You realize what you're saying. You saved a life today, but you've just put yourself back in the crosshairs of every command structure and intelligence unit that ever wanted to control you. You have no sanctuary anymore. Emily leaned back, calm, collected. Years of hiding had sharpened her instincts, and now they flared once more. Sanctuary is overrated, she said softly, almost to herself. Control is everything, and I've learned to survive without it. Today, tomorrow, whatever comes next, I survive. Hale's jaw tightened. He had known Night Fury's legend, had trained alongside pilots who had whispered her name in awe, had even feared the myth at times. But hearing it, seeing it, witnessing it in real time, it was different. She wasn't a story. She was a force, and the Air Force had just reawakened it. Somewhere deep in the base, alarms continued to echo, not because of Raptor 2-1 anymore, but because Night Fury had returned. And Command didn't know whether to fear her, respect her, or try to control her. Emily exhaled. The weight of the past, the responsibility of the present, and the uncertainty of the future pressed down on her. But she carried it all with the precision and grace of someone who had survived impossible odds. Then the general leaned forward again, voice lower, urgent. "Captain Carter, you'll need to brief classified personnel immediately. They're waiting for the full story, everything. No omissions. They want answers before the end of the day." Emily's eyes flicked toward the door. She could feel the pull of obligation, duty, and exposure. 7 years of hiding had ended in 10 seconds of emergency action. Now, the past she thought was buried would be forced into daylight. She rose from her seat, calm but resolute. Hale followed silently, a mix of concern and awe written across his face. Emily's mask returned. Night Fury was back in the world she had left, but the world had changed, and she would need to decide whether to remain a ghost or step fully into the legend that refused to die. Somewhere outside the room, engineers whispered, She's really Night Fury." And in that instant, Emily realized one undeniable truth. Legends never stay buried. The briefing room smelled of recycled air and tension. Emily Carter stood at the front, facing a wall of high-ranking officers, intelligence analysts, and pilots. Charts, satellite images, and redacted mission files projected onto the screens behind her, illuminating her face in a harsh, unflattering light. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. Every mind was calculating risk, authority, and protocol. "Captain Carter," the general began, voice crisp, "we're here to understand exactly what happened 7 years ago, why you walked away, and why you've returned now." Emily inhaled slowly, measuring each word. 7 years of silence, of hiding, of discipline, had built a wall between her past and her present. Now, she had to explain why she had abandoned the life that demanded everything from her. "The maneuver," she began, voice steady but edged with suppressed emotion. "The one that earned the call sign it wasn't supposed to exist. It destabilized the Raptor's AI completely. I could override it instinctively, but no one else could." A murmur ran through the room. Several officers exchanged glances, the weight of her admission sinking in. Hale's eyes narrowed. He knew the maneuver. He trained others to execute parts of it, but Emily's description matched the legend almost exactly. "They wanted it automated," she continued, her tone hardening. "They said it would be safer if the system controlled it, but I refused. It would have gotten pilots killed. It did twice. 2 friends died because they ignored my warnings. I saved the jet, but I couldn't save them, and after that I walked away." The room fell silent. The young engineers who had only recently been introduced to her brilliance sat frozen, trying to imagine the stakes she had faced in the sky. The older officers, some of whom had briefed her before her disappearance, stared with a mixture of awe and guilt. Hale broke the silence. "And you've been hiding all this time, why not come back?" Emily's gaze hardened. "Because every time I walked into a base after that night I could feel it. The program wanted to claim me, use me. Command would expect Night Fury to fly missions, to execute maneuvers that were illegal, classified, and deadly. I refused, so I hid. 7 years of hiding. 7 years of staying alive, because if I'd stayed, they would have forced me into things I wasn't ready to do, things I would never forgive myself for." The general leaned forward, scrutinizing her. "And now?" "Now," Emily said, voice low but unwavering, "I don't have a choice. The foreign threat isn't a simulation. They've stolen tech that I understand better than anyone. Jets, AI systems, stolen prototypes. And if I don't step in, people will die. Innocent people. Pilots who think they're in control but are really flying death traps." Hale's jaw tightened. He had flown countless high-risk missions, but the weight of Emily's words hit differently. She wasn't boasting. She wasn't exaggerating. She was warning. The general's eyes sharpened. "Captain Carter, if you engage, you're risking your life. Protocols forbid these maneuvers without proper authorization. You're aware of that." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm aware, and I've already weighed it. Every risk, every outcome. If I don't do it, someone else dies. I'm not risking the Air Force, the program, or myself for glory. I'm risking everything to save lives, again." Hale stepped forward, voice tense. "You know they'll question everything you do. Every action will be scrutinized, every decision logged. They won't give you leeway like today." Emily turned her gaze toward him, steady and sharp. "I don't need leeway, I need control. And right now, I'm the only one who can control this." The general exhaled, leaning back. "Very well. You'll brief a small, trusted team. Hybrid authorization granted under Delta 7 protocol. You will operate outside standard flight channels. You will report immediately after mission completion." Emily's heart tightened, not with fear but anticipation. She had trained for this her entire life, yet the stakes had never been higher. As she prepared to leave the room, Hale followed her, voice low. "Emily, you can't do this alone. Not this time. Whatever's out there, it's bigger than anything you've faced before. You're a legend, yes, but even legends can be caught off guard." Emily didn't answer immediately. She adjusted her flight suit, slipping on the gloves that had been made specifically for her hands, small, precise, calibrated for the subtle maneuvers she executed with surgical accuracy. She placed her helmet under her arm, the matte black surface catching the overhead lights. "I've never needed luck, Captain Hale," she said finally, voice quiet but deadly serious. "I've never relied on anyone but myself, but—" she hesitated just slightly, enough for him to notice. "I don't plan to fail this time, not for them, not for me, not for anyone." The team waiting outside the room was small but elite. Technicians, intelligence analysts, a single reconnaissance officer, and Hale. They knew little about the specifics of what she had done, only that she was Night Fury, the pilot who had once become a living legend by bending the impossible to her will. Emily's mind raced as she boarded the Raptor. Every control was familiar, every instrument an extension of her own senses. 7 years out of active duty had dulled nothing. Muscle memory, intuition, and a finely tuned survival instinct guided her movements like a symphony of precision. Hale watched her climb into the cockpit, gripping the canopy latch for a moment longer than necessary. He knew the story, the legend, but watching her in action was different. She didn't just fly. She commanded the aircraft like it was a living organism, responding instantly to her thoughts. Once seated, Emily ran a final systems check. The Raptor hummed beneath her, engines idling like a predator waiting for the hunt. Her eyes flicked to the radar. The stolen prototypes, highly advanced AI fighters, were already active, testing borders, seeking weaknesses in American defense systems. She exhaled, fingers tightening on the controls. 7 years of hiding had ended. 7 years of silence, training, and survival had brought her to this moment. Outside, Hale muttered to himself, barely audible, "May the skis remember, she's still Night Fury." Emily's pulse steadied, mind honed to a razor edge. The jet leapt forward with a roar, slicing through the desert air as if it recognized its pilot, waiting for her commands. The mission had begun. But somewhere over the horizon, the enemy had already noticed her, and they were ready. The countdown to chaos had officially started. The desert beneath Emily Carter's Raptor blurred into streaks of gold and red as the aircraft sliced through the afternoon heat. Each second stretched like elastic, every heartbeat synchronized with the jet's mechanical pulse. The stolen prototypes were ahead, sleek, faster than anything she had flown in years, and equally lethal. They were testing her limits before she even engaged. Hale's voice crackled in her earpiece, calm but tense. "Emily, they're maneuvering like they know you're coming. Every pattern is evasive. You're not just facing prototypes, they're anticipating you." Emily's jaw tightened. Anticipation was a tool she had mastered, a way to predict reactions, whether in combat or survival. "I'm not here to chase them," she said, eyes narrowing on the radar. "I'm here to control the engagement, set traps, force them to respond." The first prototype banked sharply, breaking formation, testing her reflexes. Emily didn't flinch. Years of instinct, honed in flight school and battle simulations, guided her hands. The Raptor responded like an extension of her will, twisting and diving with unnatural precision. Hale swallowed audibly in his headset. They're faster than you remember and smarter. This isn't a simulation anymore. I remember everything, she replied calmly, though inside adrenaline roared like wildfire. 7 years of exile had not dulled her skill, they had sharpened it. Every maneuver, every instinct, every split-second decision was fueled by memory, fear, and necessity. A warning light blinked, signaling the first prototype was closing in on her 6 o'clock. Emily rotated the canopy view, micro-adjusting her velocity. She banked hard, diving into a narrow canyon that forced the prototype to overshoot. Her pulse thumped, not with fear but with focus. Hale's voice was quiet now, almost reverent. I've flown with legends, but she's a force of nature. Look at her. She doesn't just fly, she dictates the air. Emily didn't answer. The radio channels crackled with warnings from the base. Unauthorized engagement detected. Delta 7 pilot taking action outside standard protocol. She ignored them. Standard protocol was a cage. She was Night Fury. Cages didn't apply to her. The second prototype struck from above, an aggressive dive toward her altitude. Emily anticipated the vector in an instant, performing a near-impossible barrel roll through the canyon walls. The aircraft groaned under stress, engines screaming, but she held control. They're fast but predictable, she thought, eyes narrowing. They mimic instinct, but they don't understand improvisation. Using a combination of evasive maneuvers and controlled bursts, she led the prototypes into a trap, a narrow pass that forced them into collision courses with the terrain if they maintained their aggressive pursuit. They adjusted, narrowly avoiding disaster, but she had bought herself time and control. Hale's voice cut through the tension. Emily, you're not just controlling them, you're rewriting the engagement rules in real time. Emily's hands tightened on the throttle. It's the only way, she said. If I don't control this, the prototypes adapt. And once they adapt, no one survives, not the jets, not the pilots, not anyone. The first prototype closed in again, firing simulated electronic countermeasures. Emily's Raptor shook, systems flickering, but she anticipated the attack. She inverted, flipping over the canyon wall, then twisted back into a dive that put her directly above the prototype. They never taught them this in manuals, she thought. I taught myself this in Fire and Loss. She engaged the hybrid controls she had mastered 7 years ago, overriding the AI autopilot in a delicate dance that allowed her to match the prototype's velocity while predicting its next move. The second prototype responded, a mirror of the first attempting to flank her. Emily smirked behind her visor. Two can play this game, she muttered. With a sudden series of precise banking maneuvers, she forced them both into a tight loop around a canyon ridge. Their AI predicted human pilots, not Night Fury. The prototypes collided midair, not fatally, but enough to destabilize their formation. Sparks erupted as sensors overloaded. Emily maintained altitude, her pulse steady despite the chaos. Hale's voice was a whisper. You're incredible, I've never seen anything like this. The stories were true. Emily's focus didn't waver. The thrill of engagement mixed with the haunting weight of loss she carried. Every maneuver was not just skill. It was survival, memory, and instinct intertwined. She had survived impossible odds before, and she intended to do it again. Suddenly, an alert from the base broke through her concentration. Multiple hostile readings inbound. Unknown aircraft matching Delta 7 signatures approaching U.S. airspace from the northeast. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Emily froze for a heartbeat, calculating variables at lightning speed. If she engaged these new unknowns without preparation, she risked disaster, not just for herself, but for the entire operation. "They are escalating," Hale said in disbelief. "They're challenging everything you do." Emily's eyes narrowed. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "Good," she whispered. "Then we escalate first." She initiated a climb, pulling the Raptor into an altitude that offered both visibility and leverage. The prototypes, destabilized but still functional, trailed below, attempting to recover. Hale's voice was taut with awe and concern. "Emily, you're going to push them past limits they weren't designed for, if you miscalculate." "I won't miscalculate," she interrupted, voice steady, eyes fixed on the horizon. "They adapt, I adapt faster, always faster. That's the difference between me and them." The sun glared off the canopy, casting a gold hue over her face. 7 years of hiding had taught her patience, discipline, and survival, but nothing could have prepared her for the exhilaration of facing adversaries who forced her to remember everything she had ever learned. Below, the canyon twisted and turned, a deadly playground. The prototypes attempted aggressive flanking maneuvers, but Emily anticipated, predicted, and corrected. She wasn't just surviving, she was teaching the AI that she was a predator, not prey. The first Raptor faltered under her pressure, narrowly avoiding the canyon wall, while the second struggled to maintain formation. Emily's pulse remained calm, her focus laser-sharp. Every fraction of a second was a lifetime, every decision a calculated risk. Suddenly, the radar lit up. Additional incoming aircraft, faster, more aggressive, closing in from multiple vectors. The situation had escalated beyond a simple interception. She realized with grim clarity, this was not just a test. This was a war in miniature, and she was the only one capable of surviving it. Hale's voice broke into the radio, urgent. "Emily, more incoming. You need extraction." She shook her head, visor reflecting the sprawling canyon below. "Extraction isn't an option," she replied firmly. "Not yet. I engage, I control, then I extract. That's how this ends." Her fingers gripped the controls tighter. The Raptor roared, engine screaming, as she surged forward into the unknown, every maneuver a combination of legacy skill, instinct, and the ruthless precision that had made Night Fury a legend. The desert sky stretched wide above, sun dipping low, shadows lengthening. And Emily, the woman who had hidden for 7 years, was no longer invisible. She was the predator. And the sky was hers. The desert stretched beneath Emily Carter like an endless canvas, streaked with shadows from the sinking sun. The Raptor vibrated beneath her hands, engines roaring, systems straining against maneuvers that would have shattered lesser pilots. Ahead, the enemy prototypes, sleek, merciless, unyielding, closed the distance. Multiple aircraft now bore down from every vector, and for the first time in 7 years, Emily allowed herself a grim smile. "This is what I was built for." Hale's voice crackled in her earpiece, tense but steady. "Emily, they're more organized than anticipated. You've got less than 10 minutes before engagement is inevitable. Extraction is on the table, pull out now." She shook her head. "No, extraction isn't an option, not when lives are at stake. I didn't come back for glory, I came back to control this, and I will." Every maneuver, every tilt, every dive was precise. The enemy jets responded to patterns, predicting human error, but they had never flown against Night Fury. Emily's mind moved faster than the Raptor itself, calculating vectors, speeds, and countermeasures in microseconds. She led the enemy into a narrow canyon, baiting them into traps she had memorized from simulations and real combat years ago. The first prototype surged ahead, aiming for an intercept. Emily inverted, flipping the Raptor over the canyon wall, narrowly avoiding a collision, and then forced the prototype into a banking loop that exposed its vulnerable rear thrusters. Sparks flew as the jet. AI attempted a recovery maneuver it hadn't been programmed to execute. Hale muttered, awe and disbelief mixing in his voice. "She's rewriting the rules mid-flight. She's teaching them to fail." The second prototype, more aggressive, attempted to flank her from below. Emily accelerated, pulling the jet into a sudden vertical climb. The prototype miscalculated, overshot, and nearly collided with the canyon wall. Every move Emily made was a deadly lesson in precision, forcing the enemy into mistakes they couldn't correct. Above, the sky darkened with the setting sun, long shadows stretching across the desert floor. Emily's eyes narrowed. She could see the faint heat signatures of additional incoming aircraft, foreign AI fighters, faster and smarter than anything the Air Force had encountered before. Extraction was no longer viable. The battlefield had grown and the stakes had multiplied. Hale's voice was tense now. "Emily, this isn't just about surviving. They've adapted. You've got less than 5 minutes before they adjust their algorithms to match your moves." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. Her mind raced. Adaptation is survival. Anticipation is control. I control the sky or I die. She initiated a maneuver she had never performed outside simulations. Hybrid override, full manual AI-assisted predator mode. The Raptor responded like a living organism, every control surface, every engine vector perfectly aligned with her intent. She dove, twisted, and rolled with impossible precision, forcing the enemy jets into cascading errors. The first enemy aircraft clipped the canyon wall, losing control, its AI scrambling to recover. The second faltered, engines overheating from forced maneuvers. Emily's pulse remained calm, though her senses screamed with the thrill and danger of near misses. Hale's voice cracked slightly, disbelief turning to awe. "I've flown alongside the best, but this is beyond anything I've ever witnessed." Emily ignored him. She had no room for distraction. Every second was life or death, and one miscalculation could end the mission, and possibly her life. She led the remaining enemy jets into a carefully calculated corridor between two towering canyon walls. With a series of precise commands, she forced them into simulated collisions, overloading their AI and causing multiple aircraft to fail mid-flight. The final enemy jet attempted a desperate last maneuver, banking sharply, trying to outflank her. Emily anticipated every microsecond of its trajectory. With a controlled surge, she flipped over its path, letting it overshoot and crash into the canyon floor. Silence followed, broken only by the Raptor's hum and Hale's awestruck breathing in her headset. Emily exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself a moment of relief. The enemy threat was neutralized. The prototypes that had terrorized the skis moments ago were scattered, destabilized, or destroyed. She had done what no one else could, controlled the impossible, survived the unthinkable, and reclaimed the airspace as hers. Hale's voice, trembling with admiration, broke through. "Emily, you did it. You controlled them, you survived. Your Night Fury, it's real." Emily's eyes, visible through the visor, glinted with the weight of what she had achieved. 7 years of hiding, of living in the shadows, of carrying the ghosts of loss and secrecy, all of it culminated in this moment. She had returned not as a civilian, not as a legend whispered in briefings, but as the living embodiment of every story told about Night Fury. The Raptor banked smoothly, engines idling to a steady purr as she returned to base. Ground teams watched in awe as the jet touched down flawlessly, every movement executed with surgical precision. Hale ran to meet her at the edge of the runway, disbelief and respect etched into his features. "You're unstoppable," he breathed, voice barely audible. "I don't know how you survived 7 years in hiding, and then did what you just did." Emily stepped down from the Raptor, mask slipping into place, calm and composed once more. "I didn't survive by luck," she said quietly. "I survived by controlling what I could, and by accepting that sometimes risk is necessary." The general approached, expression unreadable. "Captain Carter, Night Fury, you've just changed everything. Protocols, strategies, defense postures, everything. And yet you followed instinct. You made the impossible happen." Emily tilted her head slightly, eyes scanning the horizon. "I didn't come back for recognition. I came back to survive and to make sure others did too. That's all that matters." Hale watched her, all mixing with something deeper: relief, admiration, and understanding. He knew that the woman who had returned to the skis had done more than save aircraft and pilots. She had reclaimed her life, her identity, and the legend that could never be erased. Somewhere behind them, engineers whispered, officers murmured, and the base slowly absorbed the reality. Night Fury wasn't a story. She was alive. She was back. And she had returned on her own terms. Emily walked away from the jet, helmet under her arm, shoulders squared, eyes forward. 7 years of hiding had ended. 7 years of silence had been shattered. And as she stepped into the fading light, Hale realized something undeniable. Legends don't just return, they take back the sky. And Night Fury had reclaimed hers.